8 of the UK government bills unveiled today are devoted to the process of exiting the EU. The Brexit means Brexit Prime Minister urged MPs to seize this moment of national change. But the story of the Queen's speech was as much about what wasn't there as what was. Posted missing was a whole host of controversial Tory manifesto pledges. Here's STV's political editor Bernard Ponsonby.
For the 64th time in her reign, the Queen arrived at Westminster to outline the government's legislative programme, scaled down to reflect a rearranged date, and minus Prince Philip, who is in hospital. Blackrod summoned MPs to hear the speech in the Lords. The veteran left-winger Dennis Skinner couldn't resist a dig in the week of Royal Ascot.
Yeah, get your skates on. First race is 2:30.
MPs filed out of the chamber, Prime Minister and opposition leader barely exchanging a word. The very first lines of the speech heralded this was a programme dominated by Brexit.
My government's priority is to secure the best possible deal as the country leaves the European Union. My ministers are committed to working with Parliament, the devolved administrations, business and others to build the widest possible consensus on the country's future outside the European Union.
8 of the 24 bills are Brexit-related. The centrepiece, the repeal of the European Communities Act. It paved the way for the UK entering the EEC in 1973. And in a nod to the new dynamics, there will be new bills that will cover immigration, trade and customs. New bills too that will cover agriculture and fisheries. And the Queen also confirmed there will be a public inquiry into the Grenfell fire. In the Commons this afternoon, a minute's silence to reflect recent tragedies. Then the predictable crossfire, as well-worn lines were traded. It seemed like the election all over again.
This is a government without a majority, without a mandate, without a serious legislative programme, led by a Prime Minister who's lost her political authority and is struggling even today to stitch together a deal to stay in office.
This Queen's speech is about recognising and grasping the opportunities for every community in our country to benefit as we leave the European Union. It's about building a new, deep and special partnership with our European friends and neighbours. Because we're leaving the European Union, we are not leaving Europe.
It is time to listen. It is time to get back around the table with the devolved governments of the United Kingdom and work out a compromise that works for all in the United Kingdom and avoids the devastating damage that would be caused by the hard Brexit.
So, will the measures pass? That depends on a deal with the Democratic Unionists to keep the parliamentary show on the road. If the wheels come off, another election may be necessary to break any stalemate.
This evening we brought together 3 Scottish MPs, the Conservative Colin Clark, Labour's Paul Sweeney and the SNP's Pete Wishart. Colin Clark, doesn't this Queen's speech bring into focus the weakness of Theresa May's minority government? So many of the flagship manifesto pledges are missing.
I don't think so. 19 out of 24 bills apply to Scotland, and I think this is about governing, and that's what the Conservatives want to get on and do in Westminster.
You're voting on this next week, Colin Clark, but still no sign of a deal with the DUP.
Well, obviously it's a confidence and supply deal we're trying to negotiate, not a coalition. So we have worked with the DUP in the past, and I think we can work with the DUP in the future. So
why is there no deal yet?
Well, I'm not in the negotiations, obviously. I'm just a new MP at Westminster, but I think it's coming together, and I hope we will see the fruits of that in the next few days.
You hope to have a deal by next week, by the time we're voting on the Queen's speech then? You're voting on the Queen's speech?
I think so.
Okay. Paul Sweeney, we heard Colin Clark there say that although not all their manifesto pledges are in there, this Queen's speech is about governing.
Well, I think that's somewhat ironic. I mean, I worked in Clyde shipbuilding. I saw the Queen launch a few ships, but nothing quite as empty a vessel as this Queen's speech that was presented today. What this shows is the hubris and the arrogance of the Tory party in Colin. The snap general election has backfired so spectacularly that they now have jettisoned vast swathes of their manifesto commitments because they know that they can never carry a majority in the House of Commons to get their legislation through. So what they've done is diluted huge tracts of that manifesto down and put through a threadbare document that offers no real commitments and key planks of their manifesto. A good example would be on things like the double lock on pensions. They knew that they alienated 5 out of 6 pensioners by declaring that intention to move from a triple lock to a double lock, and they've jettisoned that today because they knew that alienated so much of their support that's why their support base in the country collapsed so spectacularly.
Okay, Pete Wishart, 19 of the 24 bills apply to Scotland.
Well, that might be the case, but this is a Queen's speech so threadbare, it's almost translucent. It's a Queen's speech without any Queen's carriages and without a majority in Parliament. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, this was a government that was so arrogant and so complacent that they just looked at what they saw as a shambles in the Labour Party and decided to take full advantage of it. It didn't quite work out quite like that, did it? And so we've got this situation today where every party in the House of Commons is now very much a minority. It's redolent for opportunity for people like myself and the Scottish National Party who put Scotland first centre stage and always, and we're looking forward to ensuring that we get the best possible situation and conditions for Scotland out of this new situation.
Okay, we'll give Colin Clark at the minute to reply to that. It's an empty vessel.
Well, I think it's pretty remarkable, the SNP. Our vote increased in Scotland by 300,000 votes, and the SNP vote went down by 500,000 votes. We have a very clear mandate, and here we are finally in Westminster with Conservative MPs representing Scotland, and we're here to see government and to govern, and that's what the country wants. It wants stability and government.
Pete, I'll let you respond to that very briefly.
Well, it's not going to get it, is it? I mean, they can't even come to a deal with the DUP, far less deal with the most complicated set of negotiations this country's ever faced with the EU. I mean, like, what we're going to have is it's not so much government, it's going to be crisis management as it lurches from one potential disaster to the next. I mean, it's exciting, and there's no doubt about that in the situation that we're in just now, but to try and trying to present it as some sort of stable government is way beyond any stretch of any imagination that's going out there.
Okay, Colin, Brexit is going to dominate Parliament for the next 2 years. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Are you completely comfortable with the UK government's position of leaving the single market and the customs union?
I think clearly we want access to the single market, and let's look at the two which are closest to my heart, fishing and farming. We're going to come out of the common fisheries policy, and farming, we're going to be able to design a system for the whole of the United Kingdom and Scotland that will work for the countries, will work for productivity, and will work for sustainability and the climates that we are actually in. So I'm very confident that Brexit has opportunities. I don't see this malaise and downside that the other two will try and sell. I think there's a great opportunity, and importantly, we're trying to take powers back, and that will be devolve powers back to Scotland. The SNP would hand it all back to Europe tomorrow morning if they got their way.
Okay, Paul, you criticise the government's stance on Brexit, but Labour can't agree their position, can they? The split was evident today with more than 30 MPs signing a letter demanding that Britain stay inside the single market. I mean, that's in defiance of Jeremy Corbyn's line. Who do you agree with then, Jeremy Corbyn or your fellow Scottish Labour MP Ian Murray?
I don't think that's a fair characterisation at all, actually. What the Labour Party is trying to achieve with this is a non-detrimental outcome for the people of Scotland and the people of the UK. The key plank for us is non-tariff and tariff-free access to the single market and ensure that we have alignment with the customs union. So whether that is through a negotiated position that will achieve that, or whether it's through membership of the single market,
do you think Britain should stay inside? Do you think Britain should stay inside the single market?
Well,
yes or no?
I campaigned for Remain, and I'm personally in favour of us remaining within the single market, but I also am aware of the democratic outcome of the referendum on the European Union. And I think what we have to do as a Labour Party across the UK is negotiate an outcome that is non-detrimental and will minimise the risk of us subject to trade and economic barriers that are put up as a result of leaving the single market. So I want to see us negotiate a position that will allow us to have non-detrimental tariff-free access, and if that's not achievable, then I would be amenable to voting in favour of remaining within the single market. The test is outcomes. I work with Scottish Enterprise. I've spoke to hundreds of businesses across Scotland in my time there after the Brexit vote, and their test was not necessarily a totemic thing about staying in the single market or not. The test was, will it impact their business and their ability to trade freely across Europe? That's what the Labour Party is trying to win our businesses and for the people across the United Kingdom.
Okay, Pete Wishart, on Brexit, you're a bit isolated, aren't you? Both the Tories and the Labour front benches want to leave the single market. You're not going to be able to exert any influence over this, are you?
Well, I think what's off the table is the hard Brexit that was presented to us just before the election. That's just been rejected by the British people, so that's not going to happen. So we've got to start to get in a position where we're going to talk sensibly about the type of Brexit we leave. Now, there is no risk-free leaving of the single market, and I'm quite encouraged that there's quite a number of Labour members come forward who realise the value of the single market and how central this will be to Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom, and I'm looking forward to working with them. But Labour really have to get the position together on this. They've been all over the place when it's come to Europe. And they've come back with a variety of positions once again. Now, we're very clear, the Scottish National Party. We need access to the singles market. We need to be part of the customs union. Any other alternative will be a disaster for Scottish jobs growth and our ability to work freely across the European Union. This is what we will work for in the next Parliament.
Okay, Colin Clark, some parts of the Great Repeal Bill will need legislative consent from Holyrood. What will that mean in practice then? Could MSPs block aspects of Brexit as they relate to Scotland?
Well, I don't think so, because I think we are trying to govern, and we have to govern with the Scottish Government. And I think we need to bring forward and have discussions with them that we can actually work with. I think what's more important is this is about bringing powers back to the United Kingdom and back to the devolved parliaments within the United Kingdom. And it's important that we see it like that.
Paul, how do you see Holyrood's role in this?
Well, absolutely. The Labour Party's position is that areas of competence coming back from Europe will be devolved where appropriate, where there are the powers already in the Scottish Parliament. We will be enhancing those in areas like fisheries and agriculture and economic development. We will be putting those powers into the Scottish Parliament. That is the key tenet of what the Labour Party is proposing to do in managing the Brexit process.
Pete Wishart, you'll be welcoming the fact that Holyrood will have a say over Brexit.
Well, I think it has. I mean, there's been a bit of confusion about this. The Prime Minister initially seemed to suggest that this wouldn't require consent from the Scottish Parliament, but that was contradicted by the Scottish Secretary this afternoon. So I think the current position is that this consent will be required from the Scottish Parliament, and that is right and proper. But what I'm concerned about, this isn't just one great repeal bill, it's a series of bills. And one of the bills which is going to be featured in this is to do with agriculture. And my initial reading of that means that that's returned to Westminster. Now, that strikes me as some sort of power grab, because according to Scotland Act, if it's not in Schedule 5, it should go immediately to the Scottish Government. So there's lots of issues and lots of dangers when these things go through. We'll be arguing quite clearly that these powers should be returned to the Scottish Parliament, and that's the sort of point that we'll be making constantly in the next few weeks and months.
Let's get Colin to clarify that then. Will agriculture be returned to Westminster?
I think the Scottish Secretary has made his position absolutely clear that these powers are going to be devolved back. But it's pretty incredible to be lectured by the SNP on agriculture. Now, I'm a farmer. I have suffered of the £180 million computer system, which has utterly failed. So, you know, we in good faith will return powers. We in good faith will return powers through the Great Reform Bill. And they both know this is about having a stable system to return powers to the UK.
Paul, yes, sorry, on you go.
Yeah, just a stable system to return powers to the UK. I couldn't think of a more unstable situation we currently find ourselves in. They can't even agree a deal with the DUP, never mind the other nations of the European Union, negotiating a credible outcome for this that will be non-detrimental to the people of this country. You know, I just find the position we're in spectacularly unstable, and we've seen that play out this week. You know, the morale of the Conservatives on the opposite benches is rock bottom. They can barely bring themselves to cheer their own leader coming into the chamber. You know, whereas we had a standing ovation for Jeremy Corbyn. We had an absolutely extraordinary PLP meeting last week, full square behind our leadership.
Okay.
We are yearning to govern. We are ready to govern. We're ready to deliver a radical and visionary programme for this country, which will include a Brexit that won't be detrimental to the people of this country.
And we will have to leave it there. Colin Clark, Paul Sweeney and Pete Wishart, thank you all for joining us on Scotland Tonight. Another day has brought another report bringing into sharp focus